Hi, thanks for joining us on CISO Talk. Not our regular introduction, but this is actually the second half, part two of a two-part series interview that JJ Manella and I did with Andy Ellis. Andy Ellis is a former CISO at Akamai, and he worked there for a number of years. He's currently at Wild Ventures as operating partner there. We're going to talk about some different things here. One of the main things we're going to discuss is how to build your security team, some of the lessons that he's learned from that. A lot of it went into his book. And also, how do you hire people for skills? Do you hire them for learning ability? Do you hire them for their adaptability? What's the right mix? How do you make sure you're building not just the right team you need now, but the one you're going to need down the road? You're going to join us in progress right now in our conversation with Andy. I want to take a little bit of time and touch on your book and your thoughts around building security teams, security organization. I mean, all of your wealth of experience. I'm sure you did some things right and you learned some lessons the hard way.
I did.
What are some guidance and sort of tips or pointers you would help people with, how, especially today, because everything is changing, right? It's not like you can create this static organization and we're all good. We just kind of keep an eye on the lights and, we're happy. We're far from that.
So at a high level, you should understand the value that your organization is trying to produce, because that's what organizations exist to do. And so all leadership, all management exists in that context, which is your people bring energy. You're using that energy to create value. And most of what leaders do is screw around with that energy and waste it. And so most what you're trying to do is like, how do I get people to bring more energy? So how do I make it that, look, if you've got a 90-minute commute to get into the office, why am I forcing you to return to work? Because that is energy that I'm pissing away. Because you're not just going to give me, 3 hours a day for free. Like that's going to come out of the energy you would have given of doing work.
Mm-hmm.
How do I build an inclusive workforce so that you're not looking around every day going, do they really want me here? I'm the only woman in the room, and or I'm a parent and I get all these meetings at 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. How am I supposed to get my kids to school? Right. So building that, then that's just like support the individual. And then it's how do you make sure that you're developing people so that they can produce better value with their energy and aligning them to the right work. But the biggest one I like to give people is when someone leaves your organization, never replace them. You do not want to try to bring in that same person. Once you believe that, first of all, it teaches you that when you have somebody, everybody in your organization should be training the people around them to do their job. Partly so they can get promoted. Like, oh, look, if I don't need you to do the job of a security engineer, I can promote you to senior security engineer because we taught other security engineers. But when somebody leaves, you take their money and you say, what gap do we really have? What can I really go use this money for? And often you'll be surprised. I like to go ask my team, what should we do with this money? And there was the year in which every one of my direct reports said, go get yourself an administrative assistant. So that is the most valuable thing we could have out of that money is somebody to manage your calendar and to manage like the things that you do. And actually I did the math and I'm like, oh, look, an administrative assistant cost a substantially smaller fraction of what I was making. And I looked at how much of my work just went onto the assistant, literally paid for herself just in productivity for me, let alone the rest of my team who could say, hey, I need to meet with Andy. And she would make it happen that day, like reducing friction. Or it's a program manager because you need somebody to go coordinate with engineering to fix problems because your researchers are great at finding problems, but they're not so good at the people skills. So high level, when you look at building an organization, like figure out what you're weakest at and get better at that. Because getting better at what you're strongest at isn't the value multiplier for an organization. Like for individuals, it's fun. Like we like to min-max. We like to be the best at something, even if it means we're not good at something else. But for organizations, that creates really huge gaps that destroy value. And I have a weekly newsletter. If people want very short tips, they can be on my weekly newsletter and get these really short, pithy tips once a week.
Well, I refer to JJ as our CISO whisperer. How does Andy's recommendations jive with as you talk to CISOs and security organizations?
I think Andy's approach is different, which is why I like talking to Andy. Different in a good way. And one of the things I've really appreciated about Andy, just as a human through the years and a leader, is that if you talk to Andy, he's very direct. He's very clear. It means sometimes he may seem very blunt, but it comes from a place of grounded and sort of like empathy and compassion, like he's is explaining. These are the things to consider when you're building and developing a team. You're not encroaching on them, trying to live their life and handle family obligations, and just being aware of that. And so I think how he approaches a lot of problems is intuitive and comfortable to me. And so I look to him for a lot of guidance. I think a lot of these are areas that a lot of CISOs are struggling with, because they can't say, well, I was a CISO of a Fortune, rated company for X number of years. And, I've been through the battle. I've proven myself and built these teams and checked these boxes. And I think a lot of CISOs are, even without the title, but a lot of people with the title even came out of a different pedigree and a different background. And they came out of a world where we've been told, usually as technologists and professionals, we're supposed to have the answers. Andy said, let me show you how smart I am. Let me show you how right I am. And I think to be a leader, not a manager, but to be a leader with humans requires you to have a different approach and a different way of dealing with other people around you, with projects, with skills. And so I think that Andy's further down the path with his guidance. And I think a lot of us are trying to catch up to that and take that wisdom and things like, a lot of the little pithy comments and notes that come out of the book and that weekly email are just great, because it's a short little thing. And it's almost like having the little calendars when we used to have the little like the paper calendars where you flip the thing and it gives you some little quote of the day. It's wonderful to just kind of reset your mind and go, I don't have to be the smartest person. I don't have to know everything. I don't have to be right. I have to educate myself and develop my personal skills to make the right choices for the company, myself, and my team.
I love that summary of my book and the philosophy, because that's absolutely what it is. Because let's say that you could follow JJ around for like 5 years and document JJ's leadership style. She's a great leader. You see her in a lot of different places. You could have this template for how to be JJ. And the only person that template would be helpful for is JJ. Right? If you tried to take that template and said, everybody follow this and go be a leader, like, you don't have JJ's personality and experience, and like, you have different styles. Like, there's pieces you should take out of it and say, oh, I like how JJ does this. Can I do that? But you shouldn't try to be someone else. And too much of the leadership training that we try to give people is, oh, read this autobiography and be like this person. And that's not really helpful. So it's just get a little bit better. You don't have to be the best at anything, but find the things you're not great at and get better at those.
I think if you're always the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. You didn't hire well. If that's really truly what your goal is. There are a couple other things I wanted to run by you, Andy. One is, I think one of the roles of leaders is to, I call it the raise periscope moment, is looking ahead. We kind of know from some experience and wisdom, hopefully we sort of kind of have a sense of these things happen or going to happen potentially. But somebody's got to look forward a couple months, years, whatever it is down in time, and say, okay, where we're going to be here, and what is likely the issues we're going to run into that we might help smooth out to make the path easier when we get there, or respond differently if we need to. And the other one is not teaching people to be, I want to be X, but helping people understand how to change. Because our environment changes. You may want to be the best at that, XYZ, zero trust architect, blah, blah, blah. 5 years, it may not be that. It may be something else, right? Or we do that differently today. Mm-hmm. And now let's talk about where we really need your skills, because that's changed. So every one of those kind of somebody went away. Is there time to rethink and redesign position, organization, little or large? But change is a big thing. And if you're not preparing for it, your folks are not prepared for it.
Yeah. So one of the ways I look at it is that you can try to look into the future, and it's really hard. Like, crystal balls are very muddy. But what you can do is recognize that the future will be different than today, and be ready to recognize the change as it happens. So you don't have to be the best forecaster to be like, oh, the world has just changed. What do I need to do about it? Let's take OpenAI, right? That all of a sudden large language models are a thing, and everybody's like, oh my God, like, and we can use this. And really, all a large language model is computer-based outsourcing. Like, everything you ask OpenAI to do is something you could have outsourced to a human. Now you can outsource it to an AI. And look, I have my slides generated by a company that has low-paid workers in Indonesia, and I have to do a lot of work on the slides when they come back to me. They do great design work, and then I have to tweak them. OpenAI basically lets me do the same thing for content. I can outsource it to somebody who can write lovely 12th grade English, but doesn't have the same insights I do. I've got to do work on it. But if you're sitting when OpenAI becomes a thing and saying, oh, I don't have to worry about this for a while, like, that's the change moment, is when you see the world's about to change and you say, what am I going to do to pave the road? And I hate when people say put up guardrails, because that's what everybody goes to say, well, how do I put up guardrails? And the answer is, if you put up guardrails where there isn't a road, it doesn't matter, because people are driving cross country. The first thing you do is pave the road. Then you put up the guardrails. And as security professionals, how are we actually enabling the business by saying, here's how they'll use it? Like, how many people, when they got asked, what should our OpenAI policy be, or talk to their CMO and said, like, here's what OpenAI is good and bad at. Let's ignore leaking of secret data, because the CMO doesn't really care about that yet. But let's talk about brand damage for, oh, we had to OpenAI go write all of our blog posts, but nobody proofread them. Right? No, we have OpenAI, and it's like having 5 outsourced, content writers, but we still need a content manager, and we still need to run them past, content marketing and product marketing to be like, is this the message we want to get across? And then we could say, okay, now that we've done that, when you're going to put out a blog post about something material, you have to think about, like, is this disclosed accidentally because, a week before it became public, you handed your SEC filing to OpenAI, right? But if that's the first conversation you have, people will be like, we would never hand our SEC filing to OpenAI. Like, we all know somebody will.
Somebody will do it.
Somebody will do it. But first, let's build the road for how to use it before we put up the guardrails.
It's a good example because, OpenAI and LLMs, the very large ones like that versus ones that are a little more narrow or domain specific. But even so, it's like it's the first draft. Don't treat it as a finished product. You want to then adapt it, and you can prompt engineer it to get it closer to what you want. But you still need to make it yours, right? So you're not going to take the slides coming back from overnight work that's been outsourced and just plop those in your talk that day, right? You want to make sure it's saying what you want to say the way you want to say it.
Yeah. And there's a great quote from George Marshall that applies to this whole concept of being ready for change that didn't make my book, but it was I had a list of quotes I was going to put in from other people that almost none of them made the book, but I've got a sheet of them. And it says, keep your wits, and he's giving this to junior officers. He says, keep your wits about you and your eyes open. Keep on working hard. Sooner or later, the opportunity will present itself, and then you must be prepared both tactically and temperamentally to profit by it. Mm-hmm. And so what he's saying is, like, build your skills, have a lot of capabilities, and when that moment comes, you have to recognize it, you have to have the skills to exploit it, and you have to be willing to put in the work, which is drop what I'm doing and go do something else. And what's amazing is people who live this, who do it, get a reputation as being forecasters. Like, people are like, wow, how did you see that change coming? Because you were ready for it. The answer is, because I was ready for everything. Mm-hmm. We had in our disaster response plan at Akamai, we had scenarios for different types of disasters. And one of them was what we called the slow-moving zombie apocalypse. Because we actually cared about outcomes. We didn't care about the scenarios, but we had an auditor who was like, you have to give real scenarios here. And we said, well, what if we had some reason that our building was available, but people couldn't get to it? Our employees were stuck at home, but could work. So it's not like a blizzard where they're stuck at home and they're out shoveling snow. No, they're stuck at home and they're bored. So we called it the slow moving zombie apocalypse. which is they're zombies, they're slow moving, they're not actually a threat to you, but you have to work from home for an extended period of time. And we had a disaster response plan for that. It looked an awful lot like COVID-19. And so there are people like, well, how were you prepared for it? And the answer is, well, like we had just looked at like, how do we have the infrastructure that let people work from home, and how do we make those decisions? Because people have to work from home all the time. Like in New England, in fact, there's one day a year that basically every company, nobody comes into work. The first, bad snowfall of the year, you do not drive. The roads are a disaster. Everybody works from home. Okay. If I'm ready for that, I'm actually ready for COVID as a company. Right? If I say, I want you to be able to work, but if I said, oh, look, I'll just take the day, nobody actually will work. Well, now you're not going to be ready for something like COVID and the lockdowns.
I thought you were going to say, like the day after the Patriots won, or.
Oh, actually, the worst days for productivity in Boston sports is not the Patriots. It was actually the ALCS in 2004 when the Red Sox beat the Yankees the last 4 games because they were down 3-0.
Oh, yeah.
And games 4 through 7 went to like 13 to 15 innings. So like people were up until 2, 3 a.m. watching these games, and they were the zombies. Like you had to be prepared. So it's days like that where like I had people who were coming in like the first time, like they show up for like a 9 a.m. meeting. I'm like, why do we not just cancel these meetings? Like, why are we having meetings during playoffs in the morning when we know people are going to be up late? Like, we're not going to get any useful productivity out of you, so let's cancel them.
Well, we're running close on time. You mentioned we kind of got into the AI field. Just I would appreciate your thoughts on how do you think AI changes the security world for security people?
So I think AI is going to change things. And we have to be careful when we say AI. Like, are we talking about LLMs, NLP, expert systems? There's so many different pieces of AI, but we haven't even gotten to general purpose AI, which is really what I would pay attention to. But I think there's a lot of innovations that have happened that are about accelerating value production. And you can think about open source means that developers aren't writing as much code. They're just inheriting code. But as a security professional, the same amount of code is going out of the door, often with more vulnerabilities because it was written by some rando in Nebraska who might or might not be actually maintaining this anymore. Cloud did the same thing for us. Like, oh, look, we don't have to deploy infrastructure because it's just sitting there for us. Right? DevOps was, oh, let's get rid of, the painful waterfall program. Code is getting out faster. I think we're going to see the same thing with AI, that LLMs let people write code faster, and almost every code writing platform now has an AI assistant to help you with writing code. The faster things get written, the faster they get deployed, the more work there's going to be for security teams.
So what about the other side of this, which is that, I've spoken to people, and I think, like everybody else in the world outside of the tech and cybersecurity, we've seen things creeping in. We've seen social media with, facial recognition algorithms to auto tag posts. We've seen things with AR and VR technology in the headsets. But I think I'm just now learning and understanding how far and how trainable some of these are when they're loaded with kind of custom content, if you would. Like they're taught almost like you would teach a student or a professional, and grooming them for a certain kind of role, whether it's offensive or defensive. And so, talking to researchers and hearing how some of them have taken these platforms and Llama and trained them based on capture the flag scenarios and, actual inputs and outputs from that. And, tuned each one for different skill sets and then almost pit them against each other and building these kind of digital virtual worlds. I'm kind of concerned about how quickly because the whole change thing, which is, how fast are we on the defender side going to be able to adjust and use and build these tools against protection against the offensive attackers who are going to be developing them, who have nothing else to do?
Right. So I think our goal should be to not be in that job. that I think the model of security as defenders is a losing proposition, because the attack surface we have to defend is growing so fast. And as you just noted, the adversaries have better democratization and scale than we do. Our job needs to be getting out of the role of defense and into the role of safety engineering and working with the developers to do it. Right? You don't want to have a big attack surface. You want a minimized, hardened, strong attack surface, which means we have to change the way software is built and deployed. And it's not that we're trying to cover for it after it's out there. Right? The more security defenses we need to add it's a complexity problem that just points out that we're sort of chasing the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. And so my vision, and it's never going to happen, but that our career field should go away and be just a subset of quality or safety engineering, like, oh, let's help make sure things are going right. When you think about zero trust, and I'm a huge fan of zero trust, and I know the name like kind of exploded, but if you look at like, what Google Beyond Corp did, what we built at Akamai was about changing the attack surface to minimize the things we had to defend. It was not about building better defenses. It was, oh, let's make sure that all authentication is cryptographic, not memory-based passwords. Let's make sure that authentication is tied into the application and not just the network substrate. Like, let's do all of these things that are good safety engineering. And now we don't have to defend against a whole category of attacks. Like an adversary who's coming after, login isn't going to win, because unless you have the certificate that's on every device, like you can't social engineer login at that point. So you have to eliminate the avenues of attack. And I don't think we're focused on that enough.
AJ, I think we need to label this part 1 of 10 or something. Do we get Andy back here?
I'll happily come back.
We'd love to have you back. I wish we had another hour to keep going, but yeah, it'll be fun. And things will have changed by then too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll say that last Andy you had was completely wrong, and here's the new way to do it.
Yeah, we have some updates. It's the second edition of the book, the Andy book. So, well, Andy, thanks so much. Where can folks follow your newsletter, your daily email, that kind of thing?
Yep. So easiest place is go find me. I'm CSO Andy, whether that's LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram, Mastodon, Blue Sky, you name it. I'm pretty much everywhere. I'll admit I don't post on all of those fringe networks that often. My newsletter, it's both on LinkedIn and on Substack. And it's duhaone, duhaone.substack.com. You can subscribe to the newsletter, but I do post it every Monday morning on Twitter. Like, it comes out and then I retweet it, so you can always just wait for that and then follow it. And of course, you can find my book everywhere you buy books, or you can get the electronic version or the audiobook, which I read. So if you've enjoyed listening to my voice, nice. Maybe you get the audiobook.
Great voice.
You do have a lovely reading and announcer voice, Andy.
Thank you. There was some good audio engineering as well, and I had an amazing producer, like a professional audiobook narrator was in my ear the whole time I was reading the book. And so he would literally stop me, and he's like, I don't like the way you said that sentence. You put the emphasis on the wrong word. I think this is what you're trying to get across. Here's how you should think about saying it. It was amazing. Like, I up-leveled so much in that 11 hours of recording my book.
Oh, wow. Oh, and Mitch, I think on a subsequent, we'll have to have Andy back soon and look at his in-home studio, which is pretty impressive as well.
Okay, I'm all game for.
Yeah, I've got a whole green screen studio about 10 feet behind me over here that I can do video recordings in.
Sounds wonderful. Yes, a show and tell on gear. Yep. Well, thanks again, Andy. JJ, always fascinating and fun. And I thoroughly enjoy doing these with you. And thanks for bringing Andy to us and reconnecting. So we'll figure out when we can have you back. So thanks, everybody, for watching, tuning in. And be sure to check out techstrong.tv. There's a lot of other episodes for CISO Talk and other programs, too. So have a good day. We hope to see you soon.